We have a lot of ground to cover this morning, so we're going to just dig right in. We are very, very pleased that the Water Division 4 Division Engineer Bob Herford is with us today. We've been going division by division and grilling our division.
My turn, right?
It's your turn, and we had Kevin Reinhardt as well. So thank you very much for making the drive over this morning, Bob, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thanks for inviting me. Thank you for the kind introduction. I guess I was explaining to Andy, these are actually the fun things for me. So this is, they let me out of my cage and I get to come visit with y'all and talk about what's happening. So I thought I'd just give and you've given me quite a generous amount of time on the agenda. So I don't have to rush through this stuff and like I normally do. What I wanted to do was talk about each of our main water basins and what unique things happened this year, and water supply update, recap, that kind of jazz. So, and then should have plenty of time left over at the end for questions. Okay. So for everybody, let's see, now the fob is not working. Might have to just advance it for me because I think it just worked earlier. So here we are, Gunnison Basin. Again, our three water bearing basins. Click, please. There we go. The Upper Gunnison, that's the biggest water generating supply basin, about 1 million acre-feet annually, makes its way into the Aspinall unit on an average year. The North Fork, about 1/3 of 1 million acre-feet annually. And the Uncompahgre, it's about 200,000 acre-feet on an average year. We haven't had average in a while. And as you can see, the Uncompahgre runs from the south to the north. And, it does have a smaller fall. They are north facing San Juans. It's kind of later peaking basins in our division. Next slide, please. So what did it look like this year? These are the actual runoffs. The reason I got these three red arrows, that represents the basins I just talked about. The upper one there, the Blue Mesa Reservoir inflow. Now that excludes what comes into Morrow and above Morrow Dam and above Crystal. So you're looking at Lake Fork and Savoya and Cimarron Rivers. That's not included in this, but what an annual runoff into Blue Mesa Reservoir is about 678,000 acre-feet. This year, only 430,000, and which we still have some soil moisture issues with the amount of snowpack they had this year. You would have expected much more than 430,000 acre-feet into Blue Mesa, and was already very low, as you might know, to begin with. The North Fork was actually a pretty darn good year. And so this actually, this really helps. I mean, if we have a bad year in the Upper Gunnison and a good year in the North Fork, that really helps preserve some storage because, as you know, each year, ever since the record of decision to reoperate the Aspinall unit to meet in certain environmental flows in the critical habitat stream reach of Lower Gunnison, a spring peak flow is generated. Well, that usually comes out of storage out of Blue Mesa. Well, this year, the Bureau is able to time that peak with a peak on the North Fork. So preserving storage in Blue Mesa. So that was a good thing. And then Ridgeway Reservoir inflow, actually that number was revised even down a little bit more. It's 55,000 acre-feet. Another poor year, I had like 3 bad years in a row there. Next slide, please. So where do we get all our information from? Well, we do our planning based on the snowpack each year. And this is a typical SNOTEL site. If you haven't seen one, if you run into them in the high country, that's what it all is. So there's a bunch of instrumentation. You got a snow depth sensor that measures the snow depth over this pillow on the ground, the snow pillow that weighs that snow. That data is converted into the snow water, and all the the temperature, the precip, the snow depth, all that goes into some instrumentation inside that snow shelter. That is sent to through satellite to a database, and where that's compiled by the NRCS together. And that's where the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center gets their data to generate their forecast for their model. Next slide, please. And this is what those snowtail sites look like. This is late spring up on the Grand Mesa. This would be Park Reservoir. And we'll often go up and do some verifying with snow measuring tools, and just to track and make sure that how far off or how right on those snowtail sites are really each year. Next slide, please. But here's how the snowpack accumulation shook out this year. I stole this from Reclamation. The chart on the right is basically an average year in the Gunnison Basin. And the chart on the left is what happened in over last winter. We started off pretty skinny, but then, oh boy, December rolled along, and things are really looking great. But boy, every month after that, here we go, January, February, March, it just kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and finally by April we were behind again, and basically May. Sometimes we can count on a pretty good snowstorm in early May. This didn't happen. Things warmed up, so that's what it looked like. We finished out not as well as we were hoping. Next slide, please. So I'm going to move on to, again, we'll talk about what happened in the Upper Gunnison Basin this year, and all the parts and pieces that rely on that water. As you know, we've Blue Mesa Reservoir and Morro Point Reservoir. Those dams are operated to basically generate electricity for peak demand on the grid, and then that water is stabilized in Crystal Reservoir, and those releases are steadied for the Black Canyon, the Gunnison of the Black Canyon below, and to deliver water during the irrigation season to the Gunnison Tunnel. Next slide, please. So here's what Blue Mesa used to look like at the end of an irrigation season before the reoperations of the Aspinall unit in 2012. Full storage is 940,000 acre feet roughly. Active storage about 830. So that means there's about 110,000 acre foot of a dead pool below the outlets of the reservoir, that if you drained it, there'd be 110,000 acre feet of water left. That, and remember that number, because I'm going to bring it up again here in a few minutes. But that's what it used to look like at the end of an average year, at the end of the irrigation season, October 31st. Next slide, please. So here was the worst water supply year in Colorado history, 2002. We ended up at 262,000 acre feet at the end of the irrigation season. And this was the lowest the reservoir had been since it filled in '59. This was biblical proportion drought, and it hurt everybody. Next slide, please. But it got worse. In 2018, we ended up with 246,000 acre feet and at the end of the irrigation season. And then next slide, please. 2021, about 210,000 acre feet. That's what we ended up with. Now, this was after the so-called DROA releases, the drought response operations, to preserve elevations at Lake Powell. And supposedly 36,000 acre feet were released from the Aspinall unit to help up elevation of Lake Powell. Now, at this time, and remember, we've got 110,000 acre feet of dead pool. So that means there's only 100,000 acre feet of real water that you can do anything with. And half of that is zoned by the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users Association. They have an exchange agreement. They can move water from Taylor Park and store it in Blue Mesa. So I don't know about you, but a 1 million acre feet reservoir having 50,000 acre feet of water left to play with was that's cutting it awful close. But so that's the dire condition that we were in at the end of 2021. You're doing a little bit better this year. Next slide, please. I just happened to be driving by. Do you remember May, how windy May was? And this, I don't know, it seems like every year the wind is, you don't remember how bad it was before, but boy, this year is really bad. And this is what it looked like. It looked like the Kalahari or something at Blue Mesa. And I just threw that in there as that was an observation on the first week of May. Next slide, please. So here's how the snowpack worked itself out. And this is the snowtail gauges above Blue Mesa. This is the Blue Mesa group of snowtail gauges. And you can utilize that data and make these charts. We do it all the time. The average line is the green line. And then again, an average runoff and an average snowpack year, 678,000 acre feet. And snowpack up in the upper Gunnison, it really wasn't all that bad, but the runoff was only 430,000 acre feet. Again, that's soil moisture, antecedent soil moisture conditions prior to the runoff that it's just soaking it up and not making it down the river. So we had another. I think the monsoons were better in the San Juans than they were in the Elks this year. So, I think we might have gained a little ground in the upper Gunnison, but we'll find out this coming spec spray. Okay, next slide, please. So here's an interesting thing that happened. I wanted to bring something up in each of these basins that happened this year. And as you know, the water from the Gunnison River is diverted at the Gunnison Tunnel in the Black Canyon. It's taken through the South Canal and it pops out at what they call the West Portal into the South Canal. And that blue line is, that's about a 4-mile trip down to that next red arrow. There was a leak discovered and there was a big swirling, sucking sound, and they had to shut the South Canal on April 24th. And this was a big deal. And because the irrigation season was already a full throttle.
Right.
And so the Uncompahgre Valley water users had to shut off 1,000 CFS of water going into the system. And that is a big operational problem at this time of the year. So it was all hands on deck. Next slide, please. So the picture on the left is everybody gathered the next morning at the leak site. It's kind of hard to tell, but there is a ravine up into the upper right-hand corner of that left photograph. That's where there's a 4-foot concrete pipe that goes under the canal to take runoff from above. Big storms will threaten to wash out the canal, so they put all that water through that undershaft. Now, you can see the picture on the right. There is the concrete pipe exposed. And this is a relatively new structure. So the Uncompahgre Valley water users brought in the contractor that did this work and say, hey, we got to do something about this. So he excavated it. Next slide, please. And poured concrete. Lots of concrete. 190 yards of concrete in 10 hours. And you can see on the upstream side, they built a big check dam to keep the seepage from leaking into that construction zone. And there was another check dam on the lower side. And they just poured concrete nonstop. All the batch plants in the whole valley delivering concrete. Pretty much every, I think they 10-yard truck, I think they could pump the 10-yard truck in 7 minutes. And so they just kept it coming. Next slide, please. And here's what the patch looked like when it was all done. Aren't you glad you weren't there, Mark?
I've seen those kind of things.
You have seen those kind of things. I remember 05. I think this is where the canal blew out in 2005. So they got it fixed and got the canal, the Gunnison Tunnel back open 5 days, but that burned 10,000 acre feet out of Ridgeway.
Wow.
And so that's another problem for the Uncompahgre Valley water users. You see, for the Uncompahgre Valley water users, they have direct flow water rights out of the Gunnison Tunnel, and they have 106,000 acre feet of water, storage water at Taylor Park. On the Uncompahgre side, they have extremely senior water rights that can command the Uncompahgre River and storage water in Ridgeway Reservoir. There's a 11,200 acre feet of water that they contract with the Bureau. And then by exchange, now there's another component. Some of the water in the South Canal all year long actually goes to the Project 7 water treatment plant. So in exchange for using the capacity in the Gunnison Tunnel for that high quality water that comes out of the Gunnison for Project 7, they exchange water. They give a like amount of water to the Uncompahgre Valley water users out of the storage, the M&I storage pool in Ridgeway Reservoir. So there's an exchange that takes place. And that water that the Uncompahgre Valley water users has available to them at Ridgeway Reservoir is really the water that they intend on using at the end of the season, like right now, because there are cover crops going in, winter wheat going in, and that kind of jazz. They need water to finish that. And that's their surety on the Uncompahgre side. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And so they just burn 10,000 acre feet of it in a poor water year. So that made for a tenuous situation. Next slide, please. So there we are, Ridgeway Reservoir. And again, of course, the Uncompahgre River is running from the bottom of this to the top. And you see the county line. The M&D Canal is just 2 miles on the other end of the Montrose side of the other county line. And go next slide, please. And let's talk about those pools. So Ridgeway Reservoir is 84,000 acre feet and change. And I should have made those numbers a little bigger for you. But out of those, there are various storage pools in the reservoir. There's a Bureau of Reclamation contract pool, about 15,000 acre feet. There's the UVWUA's irrigation pool, 11,200. And then there's that M&I pool, that Project 7 pool, 28,000 acre feet and change. And they will exchange annually about 10,000 acre feet of that with the Uncompahgre Valley water users. So Uncompahgre Valley water users normally have about 22,000 acre feet of water, storage water available to them. And then the rest of the water is just, it's unallocated part of the pool that's really fish and rec for the reservoir and the state park. And as you may or may not know, the Ridgeway State Park is the second most visited state park in the state of Colorado. I think Pueblo is number one, I think, or Chatfield, one of the two. And so it's operated by Tri-County Water Conservancy District. You may know they just a few years ago, they completed hydroelectric project, which now is another one of the competing interests on the Uncompahgre River. The project that was completed this year that I wanted to also tell you about is the fish screen. So on the right abutment of the dam, the reservoir has a glory hole type outlet structure, okay, spillway. And Tri-County has had to prevent the reservoir from spilling for a number of years now to prevent predatory species from getting into the Uncompahgre River, namely smallmouth bass, which might make their way down to the critical habitat in the lower Gunnison. So they were working on this fish screen project for a number of years. It went through a couple of designs that this one got canned, that one got canned, and then they finally ended up with this it's pretty bomb-proof built-in suspenders system that it was put in. Next slide, please.
Bob, can we go back to that one just for a minute? I'm
Sure.
sorry to interrupt your flow, but have you heard anything from the Bureau or anybody else about potential releases out of Ridgeway for the benefit of Powell or the system, if you will? And if so, what pool would that come from?
Zero. I mean,
You haven't heard anything?
that's all secret squirrel. Yeah. I haven't heard a thing. And I can't imagine, you know, like I said, there is the unallocated 30,000 acre feet and change. But there's a valuable state park, you know, and it is a highly sought after recreational, you know, location in the state of Colorado. So I can't imagine, you know, dumping water at a Ridgeway. It wouldn't even, I'm not even sure if it would make it to Powell. So
Right. And is Ridgeway today sitting at what percentage full? You know, it's like,
today, you know, I think I have that number on
Sorry.
the next slides. Yeah, so thank you for asking, but I think it is on one of the next slides. Next slide, please. Thank you, Stephanie. So this is this is up close. This is a lot bigger than it looks. That the diameter of that glory hole is about 20 feet. Those black log shaped booms they will float as the reservoir level comes up, and it keeps up. You can see on the face of the dam, there's a bunch of dead wood, you know, floating there. And that's been accumulating over the last 10 years as Tri-County has not spilled the reservoir. And a spill today would probably be a good idea to get rid of some of that wood, but then it goes into the UVW-UA's head gates. So I don't know, there's always, it's just a problem to deal with, another problem. And then those, they look like screen doors. They're very rigid, 1/4 inch steel grid to keep the fish from going over. This is a design that has taken years to really develop and test, and we'll see how it works out over the next dozen years or so. But now I think Tri-County is not going to be driving such a tenuous ship every spring. They're always trying to operate that elevation to prevent the spill. And now, you know, they don't have to gamble so much, and they can let the reservoir fill. Next slide, please. I think here's our numbers. The content, oh, brother, I thought I had today's content on that slide. I'm sorry about that, Andy. It is, I think the content today is about average. I mean, we just had a recent meeting, so that's my bad for not.
no worries. No, it's okay.
Again, the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center's May 1st forecast was 62,000 acre feet. Turns out we only ended up with 55,000 acre feet. And on these dry years, I think, you know, the models just struggle to incorporate, you know, the soil moisture conditions. Nevertheless, it is a reservoir that can fill in any average year and spill. So I expect to see a full reservoir come next spring. Next slide. So I kind of, this is how the snowpack and runoff happened again. So again, on an average year, statistically, 95,000 acre feet of runoff into Ridgeway Reservoir. Last year, 2021, 56,000 acre feet with a fairly decent snowpack. And this year, with significantly less snowpack than last year, we almost hit about the same runoff total. So that tells me that, yeah, all right, we're improving soil moisture conditions. We had great monsoons all summer long in the San Juans once we got into late July. And I think we're going to be in pretty good shape for runoff in the Uncompahgre River next spring. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to show you some of the parts and pieces again of the Uncompahgre Valley project. You'll have to keep clicking these along. And we talked about one more. Click for me, please. There we go. The Gunnison Tunnel out of the Black Canyon. Next, the South Canal turns that water as far upstream as we can, delivers it into the 7 main canals in the project. And our water commissioner, I wanted to highlight Scott King. He's been around a long time. He seems to know everybody, their dog's name. He's just, he plays the red card so well, but I'm telling you, he is a walking book of information. And he will humbly, give you an answer, but pay careful attention to whatever he says. If he says there's an elk behind a tree over that hill, you better believe it. If you got an elk tag, yeah, that would be Chime Philly. So that's the kind of guy Scott is. I love him for it. And I just wanted to highlight Scott. We're moving on to the next basin. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, the last thing I wanted to point out, the head gate of the M&D Canal is way up at the top of the system, okay? And a call by the M&D can call out virtually the entire, when the calls start, Murray County, which incidentally is the basin, Water District 68 water basin is the same as the geopolitical boundary. And then if on a trivia test, that's the only water district in the state that the geopolitical boundary is
Interesting.
the basin. Yeah.
Good to know.
Little FYI, good to know. You can put that in the paper. So we had some visitors come see us a few weeks ago, the California Colorado River Commission, and on their tour, they did stop here at the head gate of the M&D Canal. And this photograph, there's about 800 CFS of water. And so we had to explain to them, that water isn't coming out of those mountains up above, those big things sticking up in the background. There's no snow on them. And only about 80 CFS of water right there out of that 800 is natural flow in the Uncompahgre. All of the rest of it is either storage out of Ridgway Reservoir, it's imported water from the Gunnison Tunnel, so natural flow out of the Gunnison River, Blue Mesa Reservoir storage by exchange, or Taylor Park Reservoir water, storage water that's been released. So there's a lot of different colors of water. I showed them a chart of how we keep track of that at the M&D Canal. And you see the pickup on the left. That's where the M&D Canal heads off to the left. So I had a good discussion. I think it made an impact. Andy will have to tell you about that. But it was quite more people than I expected. Yeah.
Bob, I do want to just thank Bob. I know we've mentioned it earlier in the meeting, but Bob was really instrumental in explaining water rights administration, how shortages occur, the fact that pre-compact water rights, or as they say in the lower basin, prior perfected rights, get called out, and some of the jaws that dropped and eyes that got wider, as Bob was describing that, were really important. And so Bob took a lot of time out of his schedule to prepare and then present to them, and just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're totally welcome. My pleasure. And they figured out that there isn't some phone you pick up to call for water. It's there or it's not there. And yeah, and so I just got a report from DK, 64,620 acre feet Midway. Thank you. I knew somebody like that. Okay, now I think we're moving on. North Fork. Again, the North Fork was our little shiny spot, at least for irrigation year 2022. Almost an average snowpack. The soil moisture conditions have been starting to come back in the North Fork, and so that made it for it looked a little bit more like normal in the North Fork, and we actually had some runoff on the Grand Mesa side. In the interest of time, I'm going to kind of leave out the Grand Mesa because that's a whole presentation all in itself. But next slide, please. And so Water District 40 is the North Fork dominates Water District 40. On the lower left, part of Water District 40 comes off of the plateau, basically Escalante, Dominguez Creeks. Not a lot of water there, not a lot of water users, not a lot of action there, but we call this our super district. We have 11 water commissioners in this single water district, 11 water commissioners in one district. We have our field office in Cedar Edge. We have 5 water commissioners there. And so this is the most highly over appropriated portion of our basin. Every drop of water is accounted for. I have those two little red dots. You see Paonia to the right and Hotchkiss down below. There's a whole lot that happens between there. The river is dried up. The North Fork is dried up 3 times before it gets to Hotchkiss. And I know that there's work being done, environmental groups trying to come up with ways, creative ways to keep more water in the river. Everybody's for that. But it is a challenge because this was settled so early and the water rights are so senior in this valley that, in-stream flow rights, there's not a lot of them, in the North Fork just because it's so highly over appropriated. So I want to talk a little bit how some of those parts and pieces of particularly the Paonia project, because that's what really dominates the North Fork. Next slide, please. That water is used to irrigate, about 15,000 acres of, it's highly valuable. Apples, cherries, peaches. You have lots of vineyards going in, and there's high dollar, vegetable cropping as well. Next slide. And this is what the project looks like. I stole this out of a reclamation. It's like an encyclopedia of all their projects. It's just really kind of fun to flip through. So the way it works is Paonia Reservoir, as you can see in blue, is about a 16,000 acre foot reservoir that's been silted up about 3,000 acre feet of silt. And the engineers that I read the report back in the late 50s on the design of Paonia Reservoir, and the engineers estimated that it would take about 50 years for the reservoir to fill up to the level of the outlet. And by God, would you believe it was 50? They nailed it. I don't know if it was luck or really they were smarter back then, but they got it. And there is another component, the Ragged Mountain water users, which are above the reservoir. So there's a separate decree. They contract with the Bureau for 2,000 acre feet annually. And when the call comes on north of the North Fork River, and the call is on every single year on the North Fork, there is never a year in which the North Fork does not go on call. These guys would all be off, except for they stay on by exchange. It's really 1-for-1 exchange. So if they're diverting maybe say a total of 100 CFS in the upper muddies, 100 CFS is going out through their exchange pool until they run out. And we keep the accounting and we manage that. The storage water from the project is picked up at Fire Mountain Canal. That's that purple line. It takes that water all the way to Redlands Mesa above Hotchkiss. LaRue Creek Water Users Association is
Redlands Mesa or Rogers?
I'm sorry, Rogers. Yeah, thank you. And so the LaRue Creek Water Users Association, they have approximately 32 reservoirs up LaRue Creek. And back in the day, before the Paonia project, most of that water went down to Rogers Mesa there above Hotchkiss. Well, now they can stay on actually by exchange. They've substituted storage water out of Paonia Reservoir, and they're using more of the LaRue Creek water up above. So it expanded, irrigation. They made irrigation more flexible. Anyway, there's lots of parts and pieces to this. And Anthracite Creek actually comes out of the Elks and flows into, it joins the confluence with Muddy Creek to form the North Fork, right below the dam of Paonia Reservoir. And there's a component there I'll talk about, and that is the North Fork Water Conservancy District, which is the operator of Paonia Reservoir, through a WaterSmart grant, got a gauge on Anthracite Creek and telemetry and SCADA to operate the head gate at the dam during storm events. And so the calculation was that in a good, monsoon year, like we had this year, they could preserve up to 3,000 acre feet of storage in the reservoir by shutting releases out of the reservoir as flow is increasing in Anthracite Creek. Make sense?
Mhm.
It works. And so, that's helping to deal with and manage the siltation problem in the reservoir. So that was one of the things I wanted to bring your attention of. That's what's happening in the North Fork. Next slide, please.
What's the long-term prognosis for Paling River?
Well, now it's gotten to the point where each year it's just more sediment going out the outlet. That has effects as well. It's a scouring and erosion effect on the head gate and that kind of jazz. So I don't know what the Bureau has projected, but they've upgraded the head gate structure and they've upgraded the outlet to help deal with that. And how long it's gonna last, well, I guess time will tell. So it's not anytime soon. It's still working. It's gonna work. So the primary stakeholders in the project are many. Bureau Reclamation, that's the big, they own the project. And the funding came from power generation revenues out of the CRISP funds. The North Fork Water Conservancy District was set up to operate the dam, and they're responsible for all the O&M. The Fire Mountain Canal and Reservoir Company is the operational delivery system of the project. There are direct flow water rights in the Fire Mountain Canal of 175 CFS. Some of those are quite senior, 1914 decrees. But again, this was a very early settled basin. And so there are some very senior water rights downstream now. Actually, they call out the Fire Mountain Canal. The Ragged Mountain Water Users Association was formed to as a benefit to those irrigators up above. And it's like it's kind of like the Upper Gunnison. There's a lot of grazing, and so the cattle are up in the high country on grazing leases, but there's a lot of pasture that's grown in the upper muddies where when they bring their cows down out of the mountains, that's what they eat until it snows. And then the LaRue Creek Water Users Association is a component of the project as well. I'm getting close to the end. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's about it. And I got time for questions, right? Where are we
Yeah.
running on
Yep, we
time?
got about 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Well done, Bob.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't taking a pool to see if you would take up the entire 45 minutes. I didn't put a bet on you.
I didn't see the hook coming yet, so yeah.
You did well.
Yes, Director Kurt.
Thank you, and thanks so much. That was a great overview. When you look at your division, what area do you think is most vulnerable if there was compact compliance or non-compliance, I should say? I'm trying not to use the word call. If we have to, if we're faced with that, because it sounds like those water rights on the North Fork are really senior, pre-compact.
Mhm.
What comes to mind in terms of vulnerability? If we.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I will tell you, my takeaway is that everybody thinks they're vulnerable, right? But in the end, where's the bank robber gonna go? Rob the bank, where all the money is. Agriculture is probably got the biggest target on their back. Yeah. That's my opinion. Boy, that was kind of a downer, sorry.
I was thinking about which water rights are junior to 22. Yeah, I figured I had that.
Yeah, I mean, you got Trans Mountain diversions, you have, your Ammonite, water that needs to be protected. I mean, there's lots of, fish and rec, environmental flows, everybody's, thinks the target's on their back, right? But ag's where the bulk of the water is, and yeah. There's a lot of money on the other side of the hill, so.
Other questions for Bob?
Good. I thought you were gonna give me some zingers about the M&D call or something like that.
Sadly, we understand it.
Good way to put it, Marty. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
I hope you got a little bit out of that.
Don't envy your job.
This is a good job. Gotta have thick skin though.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, so here's my plan. It's subject to input and comment. Probably the most important thing we have on our agenda is finishing our executive session. So my thought was that we would now finish our executive session. I'm not trying to shortchange any of the other things on our agenda, but in the scheme of things, I think the executive session is number one. So it would be my suggestion, unless there's objection or other thoughts, that we move into executive session.
I'm gonna be out for 25 minutes or so. I thought I timed this just right, but I got it just wrong.
Okay. Here, what do you need to,
Yes, if you could do the formalities again to make a recommendation that the board reconvene into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-402 (4) B and E to continue the discussion of the items listed under agenda tab 3A.
is there a motion to go into executive session? Okay. Motion by Hazard, second by Beckley. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Oh, good. I'm glad to see you're with us. We couldn't see you because of all the slides, so. So we will now go into executive session, and is this also attorney-client?
Yes, it is. It would be attorney-client communications for which no further reporting needs to be made. And Dave, sorry, but if we could ask you and Bob, since we're now reconvening into executive session. Thank you, Bob.
Open the door. Amy, could you open that? Heather's out there.
We're recording, yes. I'll ask our general counsel to summarize.
Thank you, Madam President. During the executive session portion of the River District's second day, the board discussed with staff and council the items listed under agenda 3, tab 3A, Romanet 9. I believe it's 9. Believe there were some other items that we wanted to take proposed formal action on. We could do that after the break.
Yes. So we'll take a 5-minute recess. And then we can come back and start getting through action items. Peter and Andy, help me, but I think the action items that we have coming out of executive session.
As well, and I can.
Why don't you do your public report?
Well, I
and
can do the action items first and then follow up.
Okay, perfect. All right, if you want to go through those, I've got the Wolford budget. And the contract with Hydro. Okay.
So the first recommendation I would make coming out of executive session is, and I can take, there's 3 related agreements regarding the Wolford Mountain Reservoir operating budget. I can take them all as one unless the board would otherwise prefer. But I would request that the board authorize an extension of the 2021 temporary IGA between the River District and Denver Water to December 31 of 2024. That would be the first item. The second would be an amendment of the 2022 budget agreement with Denver Water to reflect an increase in the OM&R budget that is reflected in the board's 2022 budget that you just approved yesterday. That will increase the amount of money that both entities, the River District and Denver, OM&R in 2022. And finally, authorize the council to enter into the 2023 budget agreement with Denver Water in an amount that is consistent with the proposed 2023 budget that you adopted yesterday as well.
Okay, unless anybody would like to pull one of those items for separate consideration, we're gonna take all three of them together. Is there a motion? Moved by Gray, second by Catlin. I assume your motion is to approve staff recommendation. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item was an item that Jason had covered, and that was to a request to that the board authorize staff and council to file a statement of opposition in the complaint that should be filed, that should be published of the Snake River Water District v. Rhine. And that is case number 22 CW 3074 in Water Division 5.
Motion?
So moved.
Moved by Hazard,
Second.
second by Winery. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay.
Thank you. The next item is to request the board to authorize an extension of time or an additional term through 2023 and an additional sum for a total of 150,000 additional expenditures to be split evenly 50-50 between the River District and Southwestern District for the contract with Hydros, which is River District contract number 22000.
So moved.
Moved by Catlin, second Hawes. Further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay. And if you want to do the rest of your public,
Sure, I'll turn it over to Jason to discuss briefly the application of OPRE.
Yes, thanks. And this is on page 146 of the PDF. This is a case that was filed in Water Division 4. It's kind of a unique case in that apparently Mr. Orpey filed a conditional water right. And then shortly thereafter filed an application to change that water right to store it in Lake Powell. The state got involved in the case. We also filed a statement of opposition on that change application. It's our understanding that for Mr. Orpey's failure to prosecute the original case, it got dismissed. So there really is no longer a water right change any longer. And the state has filed a motion for summary judgment to dismiss this change case as well. We did file that statement of opposition, so we're requesting that the board ratify that statement of opposition. We do anticipate that this case is going to get resolved.
You may recall this gentleman at our seminar a year ago. Believe that these conditional water rights were somehow tribal water rights, and that he would have the right to engage in water marketing. He seems to be very confused with respect to the nature of tribal water rights. An exchange with me from the podium while the Assistant Secretary of Water and Power was on at our seminar. He's got some unique ideas about what Colorado water law means and does. But he is attempting to engage in what seems to be interstate water marketing, so we did file that statement. of opposition.
And so you just need us to ratify. Motion. Moved, by Rover, second by Beckley. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye. Any opposed? Nay.
Thank you. The final item for which we're proposing action is on page 147 of the PDF. And that is a recommendation that the board authorize us to retain the Grand Junction law firm of Bechtel and Santo, and in particular Michael Santo, as special counsel on employment matters. In memo, we explained that our former employment lawyer that we relied on to when the rare occasion arises, it left for an in-house position with a different entity. We wanted to try to keep the work on the west slope, and Mr. Santo became highly recommended from some other things that we discussed, and also is a little bit further away from the Roaring Fork Valley, so I think that's also a good thing.
Okay. Motion. Moved by Haas, second by Catlin. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Thank you. I think the only other thing is a discussion of anything else in the public report, but between these two items and the matters that we've already discussed, I think we've covered.
That brings to external affairs.
Right on schedule, 2 hours late.
I'll keep our section brief. Well, thank you, Madam President, and good morning, Board. The main update from the External Affairs team this quarter was, of course, our annual water seminar, which happened on September 16th. It was the second annual water seminar for our new team as a whole, and we greatly increased attendance and engagement. Last year, as we were coming out of the pandemic, our first annual seminar that we as a team conducted, we had about 130 people in person and a little over 200 online. This year, we reversed that and increased our numbers. So we had a little over 300 people in person and 130 online streaming. So an increase in engagement and awareness. We also had about 7 members of the press in attendance this year, which generated a lot of media for us, which then got picked up by other outlets. So we consider this seminar a great success and look forward to building upon that next year. In addition to that, Amy mentioned yesterday that the External Affairs team is working closely with the Community Funding Partnership team to provide a next generation of communications and outreach to make sure that people are aware of what's happening and see how we can move the Community Funding Partnership from just general awareness into a next phase of engagement, especially as we've been discussing all the needs to connect with local entities across our district and find new collaborative and innovative ways to solve the water crises that we're dealing with today. So we also, in terms of earned media on that front, had a front page spread in the Grand Junction Sentinel about the Community Funding Partnership in the last quarter. So that was a great success. Additionally, we are working on our next Water with Your Lunch webinar, which is next Thursday, and it will be covering towns and turf, municipal water conservation, and turf removal program. So we'll have several entities joining us for a panel discussion, including a member of Western Resource Advocates, a member of CWCB, and someone from Colorado Waterwise as well to join in that discussion. Other than that, we are already in the planning phases for our spring State of the River series, which was a huge success this last spring. So we're again going to build on that momentum and all the discussions that are so primed in everyone's minds right now. We're going to make sure we're booking venues in advance and connecting with appropriate board members to make sure that we are on everyone's calendars as soon as possible as we move into the spring season. So that's my full update. Lindsay, anything else on your end? That's great.
Can I just say, the team pulled off an amazing seminar. I have gotten so many comments in writing, really, about how great that seminar was. It really was, I think, as many of the comments said, the best seminar we've ever put on. So, yeah. And thank you for all of you who were able to attend. Disagree with our assessment, let me know. Private.
Okay. Lindsay, you didn't have anything else to add?
I don't think so. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just a quick comment. I want to thank Marielle for coming up to Summit County. We did a Water Law 101, Colorado River, all 101, but we also invited our local watershed groups, our state water and our water commissioner. And it was like 60 people, and people stayed until we were kicking them out. So people are very interested in the topic, and I thought it went really well, and I appreciate you coming up and spending the time with me. So thanks.
Thank you, Director Huss. It was a great event, and I think it's a good model for us to move forward as we think about the 101 level engagement we've talked about in the past at board meetings, especially prior to things like the seminar and State of the River events. So looking forward to doing more of those.
And I might just follow up that, but it made me think of that. So the reason we did it was because after the State of the River, there were so many people that didn't understand the basics. And so we were trying to kind of backfill that information. And anyway, so I think there could be more need for that in different parts of the state. So
I think that's accurate. Okay. Nate?
I'll jump in quickly into state affairs. We don't have a lot to cover, but I do have 2 bills for your review that came out of the interim committee. That's really kind of the story at the state capitol right now on water is the interim committee has wrapped the year despite having, I think, agenda by way of topics and conversations, issues covered. The committee did only refer 2 bills to the General Assembly for consideration in the 2023 legislative session. If it's okay with you, Madam President, we'll just dive into those.
Yes.
Bill number 8 would create a task force on high altitude water storage. This is a interesting idea from Representative Hugh McKean, who is in House leadership, has shown a genuine interest in getting up to speed on water issues. I think he's an ally of ours in the interstate issues, but this bill in particular is creative, we'll say. It would create a task force to study the feasibility of implementing water storage in the form of snow and snowmaking in high altitude areas of the state. Task force would be made up of, as you see in my memo, state engineer or his or her designee, representative and a senator, representative from the ski industry, as well as the whitewater rafting industry, engineer, and a representative from the U.S. Forest Service. Representative McKean has admitted that this is a wild idea, and he's expressed at the last committee hearing that it's possible that he will PI this bill, postpone indefinitely. With that in mind, I'd like to work with Rep. McKean on this and just have some more conversations with him about where he really wants to head on it. I don't think we need to make any changes to it at the current time, but I'm recommending that we just keep an eye on this one and engage in additional conversations.
Yeah, it looks like the task force is recreation oriented. So maybe you can make sure that the ag is
Right.
in there as they're talking about that.
Do you want formal action?
I don't know that I need formal action at this moment. I envision if it moves forward in the General Assembly, there will be a
We'll
number
be
of
talking
changes.
about it in January. Oh, okay, Director Winter.
I've talked to you about this issue.
To me, I think I think it's a feasible thing that somebody really ought to look at, because you could do it, a lot of it. And I talked to other guys about, over the years, I think if you can solar farm, you can wind farm, you can ice farm. Right? You ought to be able to help out somehow in this endeavor that we're kind of. So I would encourage you, and that's not my personal opinion, but I would encourage you to have conversations to figure out on a creative idea. And keep in mind that if you can solar farm and you can wind farm, you can ice farm. Somewhere, somehow, to make this difference.
I think that's what they call the ice park in Uray, an ice farm.
Yeah, but nobody pays to get.
Yeah, no, however whatever it looks like, as long as it's not yellow, I'm fine. But that's where but I think it's a great idea. And I thought about it for years.
If I may, I would suggest that I think there's an opportunity to get Rep. McKean and others up to speed on the weather augmentation efforts that are already underway and the potential need for an expansion there. There may be an opportunity to dovetail some things in there as if this bill moves forward.
Okay.
Next bill for your consideration and the recommended position is amend on this. It's bill number 10 came from Senator Cleve Simpson of the San Luis Valley. It would essentially establish or remove the limitation of the number of meetings and field trips that the Interim Water Resource Committee can take in a year, essentially creating a standing committee on water and agricultural issues. I think this is potentially needed right now. We have run into challenges with regards to opportunities to bring legislators together in a timely manner to discuss and brief them on important issues, specifically the Colorado River. I think the knife can cut both ways though, and there's the opportunity for us to be facing short-sighted legislation or issues that it presents an opportunity for the committee to create legislation that may not be necessary or may come with unintended consequences. I've had conversations with Senator Simpson on this. He had expressed in the interim committees that he does not want drafting to occur outside of the interim session, but really just wants a venue that the chair of the committee can call where we can brief them on key issues. He's open to a friendly amendment that would limit the bill to drafting and referral of legislation only outside of the regular session. So with that in mind, my recommended position is amend, and I ask for permission to work with the sponsor to secure that amendment.
Great. Andy wants to add something.
Yeah, I just want to add, Zane and I talked about this in the concept of, I say this respectfully, with no disrespect to our current or former legislators in the room, we have gotten some harebrained pieces of legislation out of that committee, and I'd love to make sure that stays only during a certain period of time and not year-round ideas coming out. So have some really good legislation too, but let's try not to turn Zane's job into a year-round activity with that committee.
And do you want a formal position on
I
this?
think a formal position of amend would be
Okay.
helpful.
Anyone want to make a motion?
I move staff recommendation to amend.
Second.
Second by Greg. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. There you go.
Just two other comments. I would note that the economic forecast that came out in September are signaling that the ends to the big spending years that we've seen over the last 2 years at the Capitol are likely coming to an end. I think that's going to influence what legislation we see. Fiscal notes will again become a critical player in what passes and what fails. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, on the economic situation and how that relates to the state's budget and how that impacts our water programs and work that we're doing down there. Lastly, in my memo, I touched on the fact that many of you have probably seen in the headlines, but the state agency, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, did identify for the first time an adult zebra mussel in Mesa County. Cause for concern, although it does appear to be limited only to Highline State Park. We'll be talking with and hearing from CPW more in the coming weeks and months, but obviously that's been an issue of concern and has required our attention legislatively and in our operations at our reservoirs over the years. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as well.
Adult or adults?
Adult,
Just one?
just one.
Interesting. A
Strong
lonely-
swimmer.
Exactly, and a lonely one. That's good, it's just one.
It is, and it's glad it's not a raft of them. like
Yes,
We're seeing
exactly.
with Powell. Yeah. With that, I'm happy to move on to federal affairs. if that would be helpful. So a lot has changed since I wrote and submitted my memo to you, specifically with regards to the Inflation Reduction Act. The Bureau of Reclamation did come out, I believe, on the 12th of last month with some announcements as how they intend to spend some of the $4 billion that they were appropriated under the act. The program that has the most details that we can see at this point is Lower Colorado River Basin System Conservation and Efficiency Program. It's the initial allocation of money that they've received. They have said that they are going to be doing more long-term and system-wide spending in the future, but I think as we've discussed in the past, investments of this size in temporary solutions are not going to get us out of the imbalance we're seeing on the Big River. I think this has been a lesson to me and to staff that we've got our work cut out for us. As much help as we've gotten from our delegation in this process, there is going to be a lot of pressure to send these dollars to temporary Band-Aids in the River Basin. And I think that should be cause for concern for all of us. So that's going to be a focus of our attention in the coming weeks and months. The Bureau did announce that they're also working to invest in some long-term system efficiency improvements in the Upper Basin, including roughly, they set up at least $500 million in the Upper Basin states for those efficiency investments. Happy to answer any questions on that to the extent that we have answers. We're happy to keep moving forward.
Director Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here, Mount. We appreciate you keeping your eye on things. A couple of questions. One is with that system conservation plan, if they tie the Salton Sea to that, it seems to me like everybody in the country should just say, no, we're not interested, because it's not our responsibility to take care of a mistake that was made 100 years ago, particularly at the expense of our farms and ranches. The other question is, do you see any momentum? We don't hear anything about the salinity control program very much anymore. Is it still being funded, or are we going to these temporary projects and programs and slowly moving away from the salinity control program?
I don't have any evidence to suggest that we're moving away from that. I know that that will be a topic for the Farm Bill coming up, but I'd be happy to.
Yeah, the salinity control program is still going strong, Mark, with some challenges on the financial end. It's a reclamation funded project, and a significant portion of the funds are derived from power revenues. And because of the lower reservoirs, that has driven down power revenues and put pressure on what they call the Lower Basin Development Fund. So while activities continue, it's slowing down a little bit, and support is waning a little bit as the Lower Basin states are at war with each other. It's an interesting kind of dynamic. You never would think, but you know, all of a sudden, one of these feel-good things like the salinity control program bringing people together is now dividing people as well. So there's a lot more to it. I have to talk to you about it, but there will be a funding announcement next summer. It's anticipated, somewhere in the range of $30 million. That those funds typically, or in recent years, have favored the Lower Gunnison and Western Colorado. I think that will continue because that's where the lion's share of the salt is. So we're looking at that as an important funding source.
That's what I wanted to bring out in the meeting is that the salinity control program has helped this Western Colorado as much as anything we've ever done. The low hanging fruit for water conservation is piping, lining, those kind of things. And in our discussions at another time, it seems to me like we should be supporting that as much as we can in Colorado. There is a hesitancy in Colorado to go towards conservation physically like that. It's more push the head gate down, and that's conservation. In reality, if we can get the willows and the tamarisks and everybody else to stop drinking the water that we're transporting to our farms, there'll be more water in the river, and everybody in the state of Colorado can benefit from that. So, together with the salt program, I think that's one of the things we start to focus on. Particularly on this side of the mountain, salinity control is a big deal, and it gives us that. It gives us the momentum to where some of the state's monies could be added to that and make us get further down the ditch. So, anyway, thanks, you guys.
Other questions or
You
comments?
have a requested action on federal affairs as well, so we can, unless
Yes,
there are additional
if you-
questions, we can move into the legislature.
Perfect.
Quick updates, we're expecting that the temporary extension of the Upper Colorado and San Juan River Basin Recovery Acts should move in the lame duck session. We have bipartisan support from Senators Romney and Hickenlooper on that. Chair and ranking member, so Manchin member also. We'll be keeping an eye on that. One other before action, but we'll just move into action. HR 7793, the Rio Grande Water Security Act from Congresswoman Stansbury of New Mexico has created a bit of kerfuffle within the Federal Affairs Committee at Water Congress and elsewhere. You see in my memo, I attached letters that were sent to the state, others. Our sister agency in the Four Corners, Southwestern, is adamantly opposed to this. Really largely because of the potential precedent it could set for federal management plans on the Colorado River. The governor has come out strongly opposed to this. DNR sent a letter. And I was asked to bring this to you by Southwestern and bringing to you with a recommended position of oppose.
Okay. Has everybody read the memo on that? Okay, is there a motion? Moved by McInnes. Second by Chandler Henry. Staff recommendation, which is to oppose. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
That's all I have, other than a quick mention. I think we've all seen that the president used his authority under the Antiquities Act to preserve Camp Hale and portions of the 10-mile range. There are intersections with the Core Act. This board or this organization has a standing resolution in support of the Continental Divide Wilderness and Recreation Bill that was offered years ago by then Congressman Polis, who worked with my predecessor, Chris Treese, where his staff worked closely with my predecessor and the district to get our support on that. It's a done deal, so I don't think we need a position or anything else there. So.
Any other questions for Zane? Anything else you've got?
Not on federal affairs. We
All
can
right.
move into policies if you'd like.
Perfect.
In your packet, you have amendments to our policy statement on the Colorado Water Plan. reminder, this board asked staff to hold off, or the board decided to hold off on revising this policy until we had crafted comments and submitted those to the state on the water plan. I believe the edits provided by staff reflect largely the
Questions, comments?
I've got the HDMI plugged in.
290.
I can
It's
project
not
it so
coming
we can
up.
help.
Come on, too nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
I didn't.
Have it on the screen now for your review as well.
Perfect.
I like the addition of the Trans Mountain diversion statements.
Was, I think, a good portion of your comments to the state focused on Trans Mountain diversions, and it was not absent from the previous policy, but I felt needed to be reinforced.
Presence reading it at the moment, so.
Sorry, I would have to be come up. Okay, thoughts? Is this considered our first reading of the policy or second? I think this is the first, isn't it? Because we didn't,
Presented at the second quarterly board meeting. So this would technically be the second time you've seen it.
okay,
It is.
So we can
available for
approve
final
it.
adoption.
so we can adopt it.
I move we approve the amendments to our Colorado Water Plan policy as presented.
Okay. Motion by Chandler Henry. Is there a second? Second from Robert. Discussion. Did this capture everybody's thoughts and concerns? Anyone have other thoughts? All right. Motion on the table. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Nay. Policy stop.
With that, we have wrapped our policy review for the year. I'll be back in January with more for you to consider.
Project operations and updates.
Board. So I have 3 contract requests today. First of those is for a CSA with Grover Prior LLC. We've been working with Grover since 2019. They helped us out in the mitigation area, rec area, really all around the project. They've done great work and made time for us. So that's which can be hard these days. So we're requesting another 3-year contract with them, not to exceed $115K. One other notice, we do have another excavation contractor at Exco that gives us some flexibility if fire is not available, and it also allows us to seek out competitive quotes. The next CSA is with Grand Power. We have a longstanding relationship with Doug Pruitt, the owner of Grand Power. They're also, by the way, he's one of the owners of the concessionaire, along with his wife, Kristen Pruitt. They have a lot of familiarity with a lot of the details of the project, in particular the instrumentation and monitoring network of the dam. So they bring a lot of value there, and honestly, it would be a big undertaking to switch to another electrical contractor, which is why we've had such a long-standing relationship with them. And they do good work, and their rates are competitive. So we're recommending another 3-year CSA with Grand Power. And then the last one, which I'll spend a little bit more time on, is for a contract with WW Wheeler and Associates. That's for engineering. As a little bit of background, this contract is primarily for inundation mapping. The inundation mapping, it's an industry standard for large high hazard dams like Wolford. It provides, it illustrates the impacts under a hypothetical dam failure event. So in the in the case of Richard Dam, there's a series of maps that go all the way from the dam to the Utah border, and it shows inundated areas under that scenario. It's used in our emergency action plan. We share that with local emergency managers, state managers. So it's one of our big tools for emergency preparedness of the dam. The reason we're looking at updating it is that colleagues at Denver Water alerted us to a data error in the USGS elevation data that underlies the hydraulic model. So that's kind of the trigger for it. And in particular, there's an error in the data that shows that Kremling is 100 feet lower roughly than it actually is. And that's really important because Kremling is the most highly impacted populated area in that inundation area. It's just downstream. There's a long time from Kremling to the next populated areas. So there's more time for that flood wave to attenuate by the time it gets downstream. So Kremling is really a high priority for us, and we want to make sure that the information that we're using in our risk assessments is accurate. So we want to adjust that. It's also an opportunity for us to get the mapping up to speed in terms of the state of the art. So we'll be using more sophisticated two-dimensional model for the mapping. And it also, one of the ways that we use inundation mapping is that we use it to estimate the loss of life in the event of a dam failure. And with that big impact to the populated area, it's a good opportunity to update that. So that's one of the components of the contract. We have also requested a proposal from HER Engineering that we're using for other related work at the dam. So we'll take those quotes, have a look at them, and this approval would give us some discretion to choose which contractor we think is a better fit based on the quality of the proposal, the cost, and important to this project, along with everything else related to Wolford, is we want to make sure they can provide us those deliverables in a timely manner. So that's kind of the summary of that. We're requesting a $100,000 not to exceed contract with WW Wheeler and Associates.
So there are 3 action items for Wolford. Does anyone want to take them separately? If not, we'll take them together and we can cover them with one motion. Director Haas has moved staff recommendation, seconded by Commissioner Beckley. Are there any other, is there any other directors? Are there any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Making some progress. Good morning, Madam Chair and Board. I'm before you today to talk about a proposed lease for Rudai Reservoir. And as you know, it's a district policy that any lease proposal above 1,000 acre feet needs approval from the board. And so today I'm talking about the CWCB lease. We talked a little bit about this yesterday through the CFP funding. But the CWCB has historically leased some water for anchor ice mitigation from for this, the time period January through March. They've done this in 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. So, yeah, somewhere in there. But basically, they've done it 3 times. The first 2 years was for the full amount of 4,500 feet, and then most recently, in early 2022, they just did it for half of that amount, mainly because of time constraints with contracting. So there's a couple parts of this that I'm going to kind of walk through. We are working with the CWCB to do a 5-year contract, not contract, an agreement with them. We'll still come up for the board every year. That's something that we may want to consider in the future, but for now, I think it's a good idea to keep tabs on this every year and see what how RUDI is responding as it's being tagged for a lot more releases with this ongoing drought period. So I think that this is good. But just to be aware, we are looking at trying to set up some systems to make this easier on both sides, on the CWCB side as well as for us, to help with this. With this contract, there's 2 parts to this contract that we've done with the CWCB that's going to be proposed again this year. It's for acre ice mitigation, primarily for January through March period. If the cold weather just doesn't come in like it has in the past, and they don't need the water for acre ice mitigation, then that water could be made available for the 15-mile reach later in the year. And so this way, the CWCB can guarantee that they can use all the water that they're contracting for. The other part of this is the CWCB has requested a waiver of the $400 application fee. So to put this in perspective, the 3,041 acre foot contract is about $222,000. So that $400 fee waiver the board has approved in the past.
Questions?
Have they waived any fees to us?
Never.
Oh, I see.
Other questions or comments? Is there a motion on staff's recommendation? Gray moves, Director Gray moves to approve staff recommendation, second by Chandler Henry. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
We're less than an hour behind now. We just made up an hour of time.
We can do it.
Real quickly, future meetings, the Lower Basin Fact Finding Tour is right around the corner. For those of you who will be there, which I think is a large number, we're really excited about it. To the extent you have complaints about the packed schedule, please take them up with DK. Dave is doing an excellent job together with Stephanie and Audrey to plan this. Dave believes the day has 24 hours and we should use each and every one of them. So don't take it out on Dave. It's really great that he's this excited about it. It really is coming together well. We will have what appears to be a full bus. If for some reason something comes up in your schedules that you are unable to make it, please let us know immediately. We are trying to fill those spots as they come up, and several of them have come up as we move through it. We'd really prefer you go though, so please try that. But after that, we've got our first quarterly meeting coming up. Also, I'm sorry, before the quarterly meeting is CRUA. Stephanie, I think, has already reached out to folks on the board if you're interested in going. We would love to have you there as well. It should be a very interesting conference given all the things that are going on the river. And then tentatively, we think the Water Congress is scheduled for the 24th and 27th, but they seem to be a little squirrely on that. So we're not clear as to why. But anyway, those are the upcoming meetings.
And we need to now go back to director updates and concerns.
That's right. Sorry, I didn't
That
mean.
we skipped yesterday.
Oops.
So we're going to do director updates and concerns. We're going to start with Director Richard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Up here in Grand County, we've had a lot of good moisture through the summer and everything. Certainly added to the ground moisture, which is going to help going into the winter, going into next year. Windy Gap bypass the connectivity channel is started construction and everything. Certainly appreciate the $1 million that was given from the River District to that project. Other than that, that's probably the biggest things that are going on up in the county. We are, I'll go back to kind of something earlier. We are starting to see new money coming into the valley that are buying ranches up with the idea of using that for the water. Easiest way to say it, whether they use it tomorrow or whether it's a few years down the road, we just don't know at this point in time. One of the landowners did buy one of the reservoir rights that went with one of the ranches as a future possibility of looking at that. And I think that may or may not come down through, but they've also already contacted and visited with some other agencies on that to see what the possibilities would be on that. It would certainly change the Troublesome Valley at that point in time with the 20,000 acre foot reservoir on one of the branches on that. Other than that, that's about all that's going on in Grand County. Thank you.
Dr. Chandler had. Just a couple of things maybe along those same lines. One is to keep your eyes open in your counties for syndicated conservation easements. It's a tax scheme. It does not go through Colorado conservation easement law, which requires a certified appraiser and a certified land trust to do the deal. This is a method of highly inflating land purchase. So the land is purchased from a local entity. Appraiser comes in and says, here's the development value. It's now 50 times that, sold off in little pieces and through the syndicate. And then there's big tax value. So what happens to the water in those situations? These land trusts tend to be out of state. We just learned this week that there's 3 of them who have purchased, the same one who's purchased 3 different properties in Eagle County. So it's very, very concerning, and I think it has implications for some of the work that we're going to be doing to preserve the water. The other one that affects water, and Mike brought it up, is short-term rentals. And maybe Taylor, you're going to bring this up. I think Summit County is especially suffering from it. That big ranches that have a well permit for a single-family domestic use now are being short-term rented, and that there 20 people come in for a family reunion and runs the well dry and overloads the septic. So those are also concerns for us to keep an eye on. Thank you, Director Gray.
We also had a pretty good summer, although since September when the last rain come through, it's turned really dry. So it's driving down this morning. Kind of eased the situation, having a better summer, seeming more normal. The biggest question I get from my constituents, and I don't have an answer, is, so what's going on with, they read about the Lake Powell being low, and so what's going on? Are they going to steal our water? That's the question. So people understand that things are coming to a head. They don't understand how or what maybe could happen, like we talked about here in this meetings, but they are on edge and understand that they've been paying attention. So I guess my report.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I guess a couple of weeks ago, it rained a big time. Over an inch of rain right in Montrose, right in that area, which is probably the biggest rain we've had in 2 or 3 years. On crops that we're just laying out there in the field, we raise them through the drought and then they get flooded and harvest them. But the beans are pretty well harvested in the community. All that's really left is shell corn, picking corn. There are some onions that are straggling in, so we made a crop. But in that community, they've made a crop for hundreds, 100+ years. So they are concerned. You hear some talk about it, but I think one of the things that we're trying to do on our part is to raise awareness that it's not simply something that somebody else is going to do. You need to go to those meetings. If there's a water meeting, community members need to come. And I see the awareness in people is coming. You can see that in our seminar. More and more people they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing, but they know they should be aware of it. And they're starting to come and find out, like this 101 meeting and those kind of things. That's probably the most heartening thing that's happened, is people who don't have a water right are concerned about what's happening in their community. So, we're we're planting some winter wheat, and some spelt, some cover crops. So, life goes on the farm. I mean, those guys are the original optimists. So, things are okay. We're going to be all right.
See you at the Water Summit in Montrose on the 10th of November.
I may be taking a nap.
Fair enough.
Director McGinnis.
Same thing, good moisture and along the remarks that Mr. Heenan made. We have every day on our AM station for some reason, the AM station, a group out of California, animal rights organization asking for conservation easements. Mind that our conservation easements, 90% of them are funded out of the Denver metropolitan area. And I wasn't exaggerating the other day. We've done a lot of studies on it, but we estimate about 74% of ours land in Mesa County is owned by the federal government. And so the balance of the 26% or so that's left, we approximate between 23 and 25% of that private property is locked in perpetuity in conservation easements, almost all of which have no learning provisions. And many of them have been disallowed. And we were kind of joking, big business got into these tax credits as soon as that became available, that you could sell those goods. So that was the reason for my caution. In Mesa County, we're in the state of Colorado last week, we think about the average county, Colorado has about 2% of the private property. Conservation. So we by far lead any other county. And there's heavy marketing. A lot of the people aren't paying attention to what the fine print is on those things. So I'm not surprised if there's syndicated spread up to your county.
Director Hawes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, since we've talked a lot about the general concerns, I won't go to those, but I definitely want to echo Director Chandler Henry's comments about the short-term rental issue. I didn't even know it was an issue until we had our summit, our Water Law 101, and it became clear from conversations afterwards of what a big issue that is, because we have in-house use only wells in a lot of the parts of our county, and now they're supposed to be regulated for a certain number of people. And now they've got hot tubs, and now they've got 16 people coming every weekend. And it's really impacting just the groundwater levels. It's years ago, Scott Hummer, the water commissioner, went around and actually enforced it. And now they've lost that. And so now the county's trying to figure out, how do we regulate this? How do we work with the state? So if you have a big tourism industry, short-term rental issues, I think are going to continue to become, we're just learning the ramifications. It's hard enough because it's impacting our workforce in the county. Nobody can afford to be there. So that's one issue. And now this water issue is starting to come up in certain neighborhoods. And this guy came up and talked about, he's a well driller. I guess he's one of the few in Summit County. He's been there 40 years. And he's like, I'm deepening wells now. That's my new job, is trying to deepen wells, which you can only do for so long. So anyway, it was a new issue to me, and I just thought it'd be worth making sure we're just aware of it. And how does that play out in our resorts, community counties, and tourism?
So you want Hummer the Hammer back?
Yeah, he's retired. I hear he's available. I'm sure he'd love that.
Yes.
Thank you. So in Gunnison County, our hay is pretty much up. pretty much. Some of it got wet and it's taken longer. A lot of the issues that are on our top of mind in Gunnison County have kind of already been raised. Division Engineer Herbert's presentation I thought was great. Really appreciate that he came and that he was invited to come. Water quality in Blue Mesa is an issue for folks because of temperature changes. I think that's already on our radar. And then I wanted to highlight the Upper Gunnison Water Conservancy District. I checked in with them to see if they wanted anything mentioned, and Sonia sent me a list that was more than a page long, a list of bullet points. So they're just busy on a lot of fronts, but they did get, the district got $140,000 to work on a drought contingency plan, and they got that from the Bureau of Reclamation. So I think that they'll be actively soliciting input from different types of water users. And I look forward to trying to convince the stock growers to get engaged on the development of the drought contingency plan, because it'll only be as good as the participation, And then Kevin Ryan came to the September board meeting, which I missed. Unfortunately, we took a trip to Lake Powell, and if you haven't been there, not only does the white bathtub ring stand out, but the darn ring is covered with mussels from top to bottom. And when you walk around, you crunch mussels that have all fallen off of the ring. Yeah, it's bizarre. I think 1,000 years from now, people look at it and go, oh, there must have been an ocean here because of all the mussel shells everywhere. But that was a really interesting trip. And otherwise, things are good. Runoff wasn't bad for us.
Good, thank you. Director.
Yeah, we had lots of rain throughout the summer. It's dry. The fall was beautiful and tourists have stayed longer. It's interesting you talk about, Director Haas said about the well drilling. The well drillers from Montrose too, and I think I discussed this with Reed, well drillers are a year out. If you hired one today, they're over a year to 2 years out. That ought to tell you how fast development's happening. And water resources are other than that, I mean, I think we're kind of moving along, so in the right direction here.
Director Hazard.
Thanks. So same thing, we were so dry, and thankfully for the monsoons, or we would have just been somewhere else, we were just blown away, but it's nice to see the creeks this time of year with as much capacity as they have. Pass Creek, which runs sometimes in May, actually has water in it, which is just this time of year is just never heard of. Like Kathleen, we have our hay up. We just don't have it out of the field, but it's like, at least we got this far, but the snow is
freeze dry.
The snow has come and it's melted, but we still have some snow on the higher peaks, which is good. And we know it's coming and gonna stay. Hopefully we can have more of a normal winter, but it's been so dry. It was a shock to see the snow stay as long as it did, because we're still getting up to 70, or we're up to 70 degrees, but that 18-degree mornings really has helped with everything, I think. So we're hoping for a better winter.
Well, as you saw in Bob Herbert's presentation this morning, the North Fork of Gunnison did well this year. We were pretty close to normal as far as the water run, and county overall is in good shape.
I guess the one issue I might bring forward with these salinity projects, slow down of getting through the Bureau and everything else is really causing a little bit of a problem in getting these projects done, because they're basically going off a 2019 bid and the construction costs, prices and everything else. And I know of 3 projects that have been approved. You know, it's all in the works, but they're sitting there wondering where they're going to get the money to make it a difference. So that's something I think everybody needs to be aware of. Other than that, I mean, we're looking pretty good right now. We've had some fall moisture. The monsoon wasn't as kind to us as other places, I don't think, but we're eternal optimists too. So next year will be better.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Beckley.
Yeah, don't have much to report. Although we're very thankful for the monsoon season. It's great. We're also thankful that we didn't have mudslides this year. So it's or no major mudslides. So that was good to keep the canyon open. I did talk to Paula Stepp with the Middle Colorado Watershed, and they're working on some fire mitigation programs that are being funded by the state. So that's what's happening in this area.
Thank you. Uray County also had rain just pretty much every day or every other day for, I don't know, 4 or 6 weeks. It seemed muddy was the word to describe a lot of the terrain. So that's really good. Try not to complain about the mud. But it was, we were hoping that extends into the winter. The San Juans have quite a bit of snow on them, as do the Cimarrons. So I'm hopeful that that is a sign of, you know, some good weather coming up. Hard winter would be a good thing. We're just having a lot of growth. The city of Uray, I can't tell you how many projects are underway in Uray, town of Ridgeway. Whole series of townhomes near the library. The new Space to Create is finished, it looks like. Some of those have already been moved into. Log Hill, Bob Herford's comment this morning was he thinks there's more construction going on there than there was in 2007, 2008. I mean, there's lots of stuff being built. So we're starting to see a real influx of new people. I think it's going to be important to keep talking about water and explaining it, because we do keep getting people moving in from elsewhere who, you know, we just aren't aware. They don't do it that way in Mississippi or in Texas. So, you know, wherever. So appreciate Andy and his effort to come down and speak last week. Always kind of a mixed audience, but glad that he's been willing to come. We'll appreciate whatever staff can offer in terms of, you know, an additional, maybe it's even a water 101 or state of the river, because I think awareness is up and a lot of new people that need to be educated. So other than that, all is well. And with that, I think what we can do is now move back into executive session for personnel review.
I just want to know, Launch is here.
So what I was going to suggest is let's everybody grab lunch. Let's have a working lunch unless anybody objects to that. And we'll do our personnel review in executive session while we're eating lunch.
That's fine. You want me to, when people grab lunch, the staff can do it.
Right.
And then we'll make the formal motion.
Yes. You okay? All right, so let's take like 5 to 10 minutes. to grab lunch, and then we'll go into executive session. So, yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah. We want you to be eating when you're, you know.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item on your agenda is personnel working matters for general manager and general counsel. I would recommend that the board convene into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-2044F to discuss the items on your agenda tab 17A and B. As a reminder, the Colorado law does require that this portion of the executive session is recorded. I'll step out. Andy's already stepped out. Audrey is available for your needs. Or can step out.
Do we have a motion to go into executive?
I'll move. Second.
By Winter, second by Catlin. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
All right, we will now go into executive session, but